How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to the Just a Thought podcast. I'm your host, Marcos Luna, and today we're going to be talking about mindfulness in social action, or the spirit of social action. And I just want to get right into it, because I've been away for a while. I know I'm not posting consistently. I'm hoping to do that more often. So those of you that are listening, I hope you check out my other videos. Trying to get a feel for it, trying to get to know how to speak, into my phone, which is my mic right now. How to enunciate, I've always had a problem. I've never really liked hearing myself talk, so I only listen to this once after recording and then release it to you. So bear with me. But yeah, let's get right into it. I think that often in our lives, especially in times of distress, right, or grief or discomfort, we ask ourselves these existential questions like, who am I, or what am I doing here? And naturally, a lot of us think that our purpose here is to help others, right? A lot of us, not all of us, but a good amount of us. And while we all understand that we're our ego structures, our identities as Mary Sue or John Doe, we're also humans. We're part of a collective, whether it's the family unit, the community, a fan base, fans of a certain video game, that kind of stuff. We're also earthlings, right? We're mammals, or we're bipedal creatures. I think we're actually the only bipedal creatures for the most part. We're of a certain race or a certain gender, right? We're part of groups. There's multiple layers to our identities. And it's natural to want to relieve the suffering of those in our group, of those that we see as us, as well as our fellow inhabitants of Earth, right? The polar bears, the peacock, turkeys, cows. However, it's very easy in these moments to feel guilty and be compelled to act for some sort of greater good. And in the quest to relieve suffering in one place, we might inadvertently inflict it somewhere else. I think we fall all too easily into this illusion of separateness, into these roles or titles that that result in a polarizing mentality, right? In keeping this vicious cycle of winners and losers, and there's the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and then there's a revolt, and the polarities shift, right? But so I'm just going to read a few passages from this book, How Can I Help? Stories and Reflections on Service by Ram Dass and Paul Gorman. It's a fantastic book on service and how to be of help, right? How to go about social change. I recommend it to anyone who's interested in, social action and social justice and making a difference in the world consciously or mindfully. So yeah, let's go into it. I had arrested a very angry black man who singled me out for real animosity. When I had to take him to a paddy wagon, he spit in my face. That was something. And he went after me with a chair. We handcuffed him and put him in the truck. Well, on the way, I just had to get past this picture of things, and again I affirmed to myself, this guy and I are brothers in love. So when I got to the station, I was moved spontaneously to say, look, if I've done anything to offend you, I apologize. The paddy wagon driver looked at me as if I was totally nuts. The next day, I had to take him from where he'd been housed overnight to criminal court. When I picked him up, I thought, well, if you trust this vision, you're not going to have to handcuff him. And I didn't. We got to a spot in the middle of the corridor which was the place where he'd have jumped me if he had had that intention. And he stopped suddenly. So did I. Then he said, "You know, I thought about what you said yesterday, and I want to apologize." I just felt this deep appreciation. Turned out on his rap sheet, he'd done a lot of time in Michigan and had trouble with guards in jail. I symbolized something to him, and I saw that turn around. Saw a kind of healing, I believe. So what really happens if you're going to explore whether or not this vision of our nature really has power? Maybe people will say you're taking chances. But you're taking chances without any vision anyways. Your vision is your protection. They'll say, oh, you're sentimentalizing people. But it's not about people. It's about principle and truth. It's about how the universe is. Maybe they'll think it's idealistic, things could never be this way. Well, for me, things are this way already. It's just up to us to know that more clearly. I see that my work is to hold an image of who we all truly are and to be guided by that. And I have been guided by that to greater strength and security within myself and on the street. What follows in the quality of our helping when we begin to know ourselves beyond separateness? Perhaps, at the very least, we can be a little less fearful, a little more trusting. When we break through the boundaries of self, we often find that we don't have to be as defensive as we might have thought or as might be our habit. Things aren't inevitably pitted against us. If they appear to be, the possibility of harmony and reconciliation is a little more real. When we've had a taste of that harmony, of that unity, we're that much more ready to bring it quickly into any situation, at any given moment, with anybody. So I'll continue reading some excerpts from this book, How Can I Help? But I'll, space it out with things that I have to say on the topic. In all religious institutions exists some sort of mysticism. I'd argue that revelatory experience is the foundation of religion itself, but that's for a different podcast. Mysticism is the attempt to understand and perhaps even merge, even if for the briefest moment, with the ultimate reality, the Tao, right? The unity, God. I mention this only because our sense of separateness and subsequent paranoia is what seems to have gotten us in this pickle that we're undeniably in, not only as a nation, but globally. We start out as one with it all, and then we're born into separateness, socialized and taught our identity, right? Whether that happens at the moment of birth or when the milk stops coming through the mother, right? And we experience the pain of hunger, we realize that we are separate. Having been in that unconscious space of, the Garden of Eden, symbolically, we do fall into separateness, and we realize our pain, right? We realize the immensity of the world as distinct from us. My personal interest in mysticism revealed to me that many important names in history have had this interest in understanding the nature of reality and ourselves. If one reads sacred texts from any region in the world, right, they might find that no matter what faith you adhere to, if you're attempting to understand your personal relationship with the ultimate reality, or even if you find yourself asking who or what you are, then you might have more in common with, Hindu Sufi mystics, like Kabir and Rumi, and even Mormon church founder Joseph Smith, who studied Jewish mysticism prior to his death. And now another passage from the book. The more deeply we listen, the more we attune ourselves to the roots of suffering and the means to help alleviate it. Let me read that again. The more deeply we listen, the more we attune ourselves to the roots of suffering and the means to help alleviate it. It is through listening that wisdom, skill, and opportunity find form in an act that truly helps. But more than all these, the very act of listening can dissolve distance between us and others as well. It goes on. We look around, see injustice, oppression, the threat of war itself, and something inside grabs us. We've got to do something. It's time to act. But what is the spirit of that resolve? The initial state of mind we bring to any social action can go a long way to determining its character and consequences, especially if we're looking to move others to act. I'll stand up at a meeting of people who are a little unsure of how they feel about the nuclear issue, and I'll see this basic initial question in their faces, even before I say a word. Where's this guy coming from? It's very instinctive and very smart. People understand. First things first. So how do you come in? Do you come in or do you come on? No small matter. There's one thing I've learned in 25 years or so of political organizing. People don't like to be should upon. They'd rather discover than be told. Sometimes it's enough just to share information with others. The number of nuclear warheads deployed and poised, the unemployment statistics for minorities, how many children starve to death in a single day. We trust these situations to speak for themselves. Injustice will strike others as injustice strikes us. We're appealing to the collective understanding and compassion. It's us talking it all over, saying what we need to do. No matter what method or system you choose to understand the world with, the reason for anyone to use any method at all is to have an answer for the opening question, right? Of who are we? What are we doing here? Why? To know where you stand in relation to the massive world around you. For this reason, much of the world's religious institutions contain teachings rooted in compassion for the natural world and its entirety, and love for everyone regardless of whether or not they're on the path to God, Allah, the Tao, Brahma, searching for the Atman. Regardless of if they like President Trump. And by this I mean the texts, right? The essence of these religious traditions. Not the interpretation of someone who's, high up in that hierarchy, right? Not the interpretation of respected members in the community of a religious tradition, but the essence of the religious teachings. But I say unto you, love your enemies and bless those who curse you. Matthew 5:54. I believe it was Kabir that once said, the Sufi poet, I think he was a Sufi poet, who said, do what you will with people, but never put them out of your heart. We teach our children to use their words because clearly violence often does more harm than good, right? And dialogue is super important. But we can't seem to truly understand and integrate that sentiment into our own lives. We still become defensive and hostile at the mere utterance of certain words or the slightest implication that one might be questioning our way of life or our very existence. In fact, today people are being fired, banned from platforms, and even imprisoned for using their words, for saying things that someone else doesn't agree with. And I think that's egregious. We take a more do as I say, not as I do approach with our children, which can be seen in many households across the world, maybe even yours. And now another passage. Left to themselves, fear, anger, and guilt are unwholesome states of mind. How many of us have them fully in control in our private lives? They pull us into a cycle of reactivity and feed on themselves. We begin to lose sight of the conditions that might have provoked them in the first place. In addition, they tend to be addictive and toxic. History is filled with examples of how these attitudes, which initially may have stirred people to action, went on to poison and destroy well-intentioned movements for social change. These are powerful states of mind we're playing with. Intentionally set in motion, the effect is usually incendiary. Moreover, these states of mind blur our judgment and blind us to tactics that might be more reliable sources of action. Caught up in these emotions, we lose our timing, make mistakes, our hearts grow cold, and we turn people off into objects. We're too worked up to hear our own inner voice, let alone trust anyone else's. What benefit in that? See, and that's not to say that anger and guilt and shame and resentment, it's not that these can't be productive states of mind. They're important, and they play a vital part in becoming more whole, more wholesome person, right? Integrating, regulating, controlling them. Facing your shadow, right? Confronting the darker parts of yourself and taking charge of them, right? Using them for your greater being, your greater purpose. Very much of the time, this inability to integrate what we know to be true and righteous into our day-to-day lives is resultant of our strong attachments to who we are, or what we want, or what we're fighting for, right? What change we're seeking. In other words, our ego, our identities as Sarah, as breadwinner, as Eagles fan, teacher, CEO, ketchup hater. The result of this self-identification, exclusive identification of self with a name or a role, is that someone must be at the other end of that spectrum. Up implies down, loss, gain, fame, shame, pleasure, pain. A teacher requires students. Now, if you're feeling miserable, there's a light at the end of that tunnel. And it's unfortunate that when you impose an identity on yourself or another and create that polarization, that it's so easy to forget the basic truth that we're made of the same stuff, right? At the end of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the ultimate, because we're also separate. We're also different. And we need that differentiation, right? It comes from the link, right? The causal chain of cause and effect that was started at the beginning of time, right? With the Big Bang or whatever happened. Every action has an equal or opposite reaction, and our very existence is a part of that. It's not the result of that, and it's not the beginning. It's both. It's a part of it. But we need to keep in mind that ultimately, that at the end of the day, what we exhale, the trees inhale, right? The oxygen they give off, we take in. You don't need a biologist or, an ecologist to point out the essential interconnectedness of an ecosystem, right? The very subtle and fragile link between all the animals in an ecosystem, within a system, within a biome. It's easy to forget this and focus merely on the things that keep us separate or what will move us closer to our goal. And it's from this state of awareness, this sense of separateness, that even the most well-intended decision can result in a great amount of suffering. Indeed, more harm has been done in the name of God than anything else in history. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said in his Gulag Archipelago, wouldn't it be great if we could round up all the terrible people doing evil deeds and put them, away from all the good people? But the line between good and evil crosses the heart of every human being. And who of us is brave enough to cut a piece of their own heart? And so another passage from the book. Respecting one another's freedom Respecting one another's freedom, listening into one another as we initiate action is a demanding task. It forces us to stay in touch with principles we've come together to fight for in the first place. Peace, compassion, concord, are these qualities among us here and now? The basic social institution is the individual human heart. It is the source of the energy from which all social action derives its power and purpose. The more we honor the integrity of that source, the more chance our actions have of reaching and stirring others. But we must be wholehearted, right? Fully integrated as we set out. If we are not rooted in compassion, how will our acts contribute to a compassionate world? If we cannot move beyond inner discord, how can we help find a way to social harmony? If we ourselves cannot know peace, be peaceful, how will our acts disarm hatred and violence? There is no way to peace, said A.J. Must. Peace is the way. None of this means that we turn away from what is. Oppression, hatred, fear. We have to look at it all head on, without fantasy, denial, or selective perception. The brutal as well as the gentle, the ugly as well as the beautiful, and the greed as well as the mercy. Death and life, this takes guts, but it can be the source of equanimity because we've pushed nothing away. We're ready to take it all in and then move beyond it. So we let our hearts be broken by the spectacle of cruelty and allow our anger to arise at the evidence of injustice. Yet we can be whole and expansive enough to retain a sense of compassion and quiet determination, a fuller heart, a deeper will. Others, those we would encourage to join us in action, will recognize in us the possibility of unifying genuine passion and quiet purpose. The first noble truth of Buddhism is that there is suffering. Dukkha, they say. We're all subject to the woes of life. None of us asked to be in the position that we're in, or to be born, right? Despite this, just because you were dealt a bad or even good hand in circumstances, doesn't mean that you can't take pleasure in the subtle beauties of life, such as a bird chirping, or the sound of a running stream, the color of the sky as the sun goes down, or the melting of your lips into the moisture of your partner. His lips. Whether you were born into an upper-class family in America or a member of the working Shudra class in India, or as a starving child in Africa, the victories and pitfalls you will experience are innumerable. The secret to overcoming the heartache of this human incarnation and becoming a vehicle for the relief of suffering is to be, as the proverb goes, in the world, but not of the world. In the world, but not of the world. To have a home on high, as Van Morrison said. Or as Ram, an avatar of God in Hinduism, or no, I don't know if it was him or Krishna who said it, but he said, do what you do, but dedicate the fruits of your actions to me, God. In other words, don't get attached to the results of your actions, whether they're good or bad, right? You do what you do because it's what you do. It's because it's the natural unfolding of things. This is easier said than done, but it can certainly be done by a person of any race, any gender, any sexual persuasion, anywhere and any time. And it can be done by having some sort of mindfulness practice, say. Research sponsored by the National Institute of Health suggests that meditation and other mindful techniques, such as Tai Chi, yoga, right, they can potentially change the brain physically in a manner that may help improve mental and physical health ailment. This isn't exclusive to meditation and yoga, however. It includes things like jogging, crocheting, reading, anything that allows you to quiet your mind and become mindful of what you're doing can allow for the slightest dissolvement of ego and acceptance of the natural unfolding, right, of you and everyone else's humanity. These are the flow states that people talk about, where you lose a sense of time and things just come to you, just spontaneous inspiration. And you're right in that zone of proximal development. Thus, you become simply aware of which seeds you sow in your life, because they will grow. Well, which seeds you water, rather, because you may become attached to the fruits that the seeds produce, and that creates the fertile ground on which suffering thrives, if that makes sense. When you start doing things like going to school just to obtain the title, as opposed to learning or absorbing value experience, or when you read books, right, many books, just to make others envious of your ability to read, or to read a lot, when you lie to your constituents to secure the role that you've acquired, that's when you create the environment in which good men do nothing and evil thus thrives. From the spiritual perspective, everything in your life is a process of the spiritual unfolding. I've fallen off the path is just more of it, right? It's all just more of it. The difficulties, the loss of faith, the dark night of the soul, it's just more, it's a stage, it's a step on the path. I'd argue it's the only path in town. It's the only game in town. What else are you going to do but dedicate yourself to, say, existence as such? And making it a more pleasant place, because everyone wants to live in a more pleasant place. I mean, you might even if you're masochistic, right, sadomasochistic, you derive pleasure from the pain. So ultimately, even you're looking for pleasure through the pain. We all want to feel at home, to feel comfortable, to be able to unwind, to not have to put on these masks and filters to express ourselves. But yeah, you have to, in order for that to happen, you have to be the place where people can come to and do that, right? You have to be the change that you want to see, that you wish others were. If you want to have good friends, be a good friend. And that dark night of the soul, it's a heavy place on the journey. But there is a light at the end of that tunnel. And it's closer than you think. And doing what you do, despite your lack of faith, right? For the betterment of good, right? Of ultimate good. It'll get you there sooner. It's very unfortunate that we lack wisdom in our diplomacy, right? It's all power games, and it's really unfortunate. I mean, who in the right mind would want to have that much power over others, right? Not to say that all politicians and all congressmen and all mayors, that everyone in a position of power is looking exclusively for power. Some of us serve that higher purpose, and that's the way we do it, right? That's the way we unfold. Certainly not most of them. And so now I'll read another passage from this book, How Can I Help? Which again I highly recommend. So I was trying to find the page that I was going to read from, and I found it, but I also came across another interesting passage that's a little bit longer, but I'm going to read it anyways because, well, I've only been talking here for half an hour, and, well, why not? It's my podcast. So here it is. But the British must leave as friends, said Gandhi. There must be freedom for oppressor and oppressed alike, taught King MLK. There must be freedom for oppressor and oppressed alike, taught MLK. Sit down here and tell me about it, said the old Japanese man to the violent drunk. What kind of victory is it when someone is left defeated? Another turn in an endless cycle of victors and vanquished. Power to this one, then to the other. Different players. Same game? Do we just want to be right, or do we all want to be free? We seek to initiate political action openly and consciously from the outset. As we encounter opposition and conflict, we try to find ways to disarm it or pass through it as skillfully as possible. But what are we looking for as the final effect of our efforts? What place for reconciliation? At one level, there's no guarantee that there can be a battle without winners and losers. There's no assurance, especially in social action, that what divides us won't seem most real. It's almost always how the game gets defined, so we fight hard for our views. There are important victories to be won against opponents. On the other hand, if we've not been driven by anger most of the way, we may also feel a little uncomfortable at seeing someone else either diminished or still polarized when some kind of outcome has been reached. We had fought for several years, and on the night the Equal Rights Amendment passed in our state, I saw one of the women who had opposed us at the election headquarters. We were both monitoring the count. When the result became clear, she looked at me. I wanted to reach out to her. She was just another woman. Equal rights for her, too. She gave me this very determined look, without anger, but you knew she wasn't all that happy. So I tried. Well, back to the kids for a while. She said, oh yes. She said, oh yes, homework has completely deteriorated in our house. And I said, yeah, mine too. Equal rights for dummies. She sort of laughed. And it was nice there for a moment. Then she said, it isn't over yet. We're going to win. You're not going to be able to get enough states to ratify. And that's where it got left. That thing about the homework, it just evaporated. She walked off and I walked off. And that took a little off the victory celebration for me. And now last little not so little passage from the book that I just feel it's very, very interesting. And so, time came for the big anti-nuclear demonstration in New York City, June 1982. The largest in American history. There was your usual politicking and preparing for it. Who the speakers should be, the text of the call, the banner at the front of the march itself, relations with the media, all of that. But it became clear, very early on, the whole thing had a life of its own. People were realizing intuitively and independently that this was just the right thing to happen now. And they just joined up. You'd get these reports, 5,000 from Oakland, 700 from Tulsa, like that, but from all over the country. A woman in the Midwest called and said, I've gone ahead and rented this bus, but I'm not sure anyone in town even knows about this march yet. Could you send me a few posters? It was great. She just knew the bus would fill up. The day before the march itself, we held a religious convocation at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. It was the largest gathering of the greatest variety of spiritual traditions ever held. So they said. It was wonderful. And very funny, too, watching everyone trying to get into the cathedral and seated before all of us, presumably were to ascend. You had Japanese Buddhists bumping up against Hopi elders, bumping up against classy Anglicans. The devotional people looked all mushy and heartfelt. The meditation squads were all cool and mindful. There was a tough Islamic contingent and long Jewish Orthodox beards and long Russian Orthodox beards. And assorted motley good souls of no particular affiliation at all. Ecumenicism unleashed. God help us. You had to laugh. And it was the most beautiful ceremony I ever attended. Total harmony of spirit. One pure statement after the next, and from the most senior and established and respected elders of the planet's religions and faiths. One after another. now from this corner of the cathedral, now from another. You weren't sure what you'd hear next or from where. The next day, when we gathered for the march itself, there were so many people crowded into the side streets, waiting to join the main route, that it took 4 hours for the march to get going. What was most extraordinary, however, was the way in which people stayed in place right where they were. For 4 hours, here we stand, right? You had only the ground you were standing on. It was that close. You'd think there would be like great impatience, restlessness, irritability, but none of that. It was patient joy. People seemed to understand that the way we were standing our ground, in place, in peace, was as much a statement as the march itself, maybe more. It wasn't just something we were doing, it was the way we were being. The power and potential of that was tangible. Everyone felt it. It was really happening. Having felt it, it was not anything you were likely to forget, for whatever actions are going to be called for on the longer march ahead. So I would love to keep reading passages from that book. It's very, very profound, very moving, right, and very enlightening, but I mean, I've got to say stuff of my own, right? I can't just be reading from the book. So before I move on, I just want to say that, again, the book is How Can I Help by Ram Dass and Paul Gorman, Stories and Reflections on Service. Go out and buy it. I paid $4 for it as a used copy. It's fantastic. But so I just want to say, while we're here on the topic of social action and mindfulness, the spirit of social action, so forth, I want to speak a little bit on the state of affairs here in the United States, right? Because I think that while social change and transforming, right, the cultural narrative is really important, it's how we've gotten to where we are. I think that there are dangers of the social justice movement today and political correctness. I think it's becoming a disservice to the very movement that it's claiming to stand for. I mean, we live in interesting times, all this technology and opportunity and everything. I mean, diversity, it's discombobulating, right? And heartwarming and scary. For over 200 years, I think almost 300 years now, people have been coming from all corners of the globe to participate in the greatest social experiment that humankind has ever dared to embark on, the United States of America. Some of the world's most brilliant minds have come here to birth their ideas. I mean, I think Alexander Graham Bell was here. I think the telephone, right? Benjamin Franklin, Nikola Tesla, Einstein, Elon Musk, even Carl Djerassi, co-inventor of oral contraceptives, came here to the United States to birth their ideas. No pun intended. That being said, I mean, America hasn't always been the land of opportunity for everyone, right? People have been discriminated against for their ethnic backgrounds, for the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, what's between their legs, their ideas, everything. But that's the thing, is people are being discriminated against for their ideas nowadays, and it's like the poles have shifted. Thanks in no small part to the Cultural Revolution of the 60s, which, I mean, if you ask people who know me, I'm a very, astute student of the Cultural Revolution. I mean, we've made remarkable strides of progress in the past 60 years, 50 years, right? I mean, I believe the foundation that is laid by our principles, which can be found in the American Constitution, and has created the ground, the foundation for this for the globe today to exist the way it is. I think it's at risk of being forgotten. The wisdom is being thrown out with the bathwater and replaced with the false righteousness that places more importance on intersectional group identity and seeking retribution for historical oppression and injustice than the competence and ingenuity that an individual brings to a given situation. The struggle for inclusion and equal opportunity, regardless of immutable characteristics, and even the way you choose to lead your life, regardless of that, it's representative of what this nation stands for. And people call our founding fathers hypocrites, but they weren't creating a society for themselves. They were creating a legislature, a way of being, a nation, a society for future generations to be better than theirs and the one they were born into. It's what this nation stands for. The First Amendment, guarantees that the government won't favor or prohibit religious exercise. It won't impede the rights of citizens to speak freely, assemble peacefully, and petition for redress of grievances. The freedom to speak your mind and your opinions without persecution and harassment is the cornerstone that allows our citizens and us, me and you, to engage in dialogue and settle disagreements in a peaceful manner, or simply agree to disagree and go our separate ways. This not only maintains order, but paves the road of progress and innovation. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of what happened at Evergreen State College in 2017, where, since the mid-70s, Evergreen observes a day of absence where minority students and faculty can stay home as a way to demonstrate the contributions they bring to the university and society at large. In 2017, however, the university decided to modify, the holiday, and instead of encouraging minority students to take the day off, it mandated and required that no Caucasian, no white students or staff were to come in. Brett Weinstein, a professor of biology at the university, criticized the change and noted, on a college campus, one's right to speak or to be must never be based on skin color. And protests broke out, protests broke out and they demanded his being fired. Students demanded he be fired. The college's president refused to allow law enforcement to quell the protesters when they became increasingly violent. And the campus police informed Dr. Weinstein that they couldn't protect him. He told him to stay off campus, and he had to hold his class in a public park. A professor of politics in late 2018 at Sarah Lawrence College in New York had his office severely vandalized. Samuel Abrams, is a conservative, and he wrote an op-ed for the New York Times where he criticized the college's ideological uniformity. He was concerned with overtly progressive programs with names like Stay Healthy, Stay Woke, Microaggressions, and Understanding White Privilege, without offering any program that offered a meaningful ideological alternative. He also noted the 12-to-1 ratio of liberal to even moderately conservative professors in New England. He had, photos of his family and bumper stickers on his door to welcome students that wanted to talk to him. But after his NYT article, the bumper stickers were torn down, his family photos were smashed or stolen, and threatening messages were written on the walls, including demands that he leave his position, and messages like, "My orientation isn't ideological, asshole," end quote. Following this incident, Abrams repeatedly contacted the college's president, asking her to condemn the perpetrator's actions and re-emphasize the importance of free speech. She sent a half-hearted email to everyone on campus and mentioned the importance of free expression, but especially stressed her commitment to diversity and inclusive excellence. Apparently not for her staff. He was accused of attacking members of the community by the college president and creating a hostile work environment. A diaspora coalition was formed and demonstrated protests, claiming they wouldn't stop until he was put before the coalition and put up for tenure review, and further demands were met, like consistent stock of laundry detergent, 2 meals a day for every student, diversity training every fall semester, new minority therapists, and a no whites allowed scholarship. we all heard about what happened at the campus of UC Berkeley, where a conservative who was recruiting members for Turning Point USA, which is a student-run, conservative organization. He was punched in the face by a guy who was much bigger than him, who had worked on campus, before, and he was punched. He was punched hard and more than once. Earlier this year, a teenager from Covington High School was the target of scrutiny, right after he was shown to be standing with a rude and combative posture and a smug smile in front of an older Native American gentleman. The teenager was accused of leading a group of MAGA hat sporting peers to surround and harass the old tribal drumming Native American. Well-known public figures like Senator Elizabeth Warren, Jim Carrey, Alyssa Milano expressed their outrage with the teenagers. One Disney movie producer, Jack Morrissey, even posted a graphic with the caption, #MAGA kids go screaming hats first into the wood chipper, and a graphic of him pushing a foot into a wood chipper and blood spewing out of it. Comedian and actress, not so comedic comedian and actress Kathy Griffin called for the doxing of the teens, tweeting, "I want names, shame them." When further information surfaced and context of the situation came to light, it turned out the teenagers weren't the aggressors. Instead, a group of middle-aged Jewish African American males known as the Black Israelites were taunting and screaming slurs at the young students. For some reason, the elderly Native American felt the need to de-escalate the situation by chanting tribal songs in the teenagers' face. Despite this reprehensible treatment towards teenage students, both on and offline, no one has been held responsible for the tarnishing of their names or their defamation. Luckily, some of the families have lawyered up and are suing the Washington Post for $250 million. One need not look far and wide to see the many instances in which conservatives or right-wing individuals are being shamed, harassed, and even beaten. I fall politically left on just about everything. You name it. I lean more to the left, but that isn't. I consider myself moderate, right, and central, if anything at all. But I talk to people and they call me conservative just because I'm not willing to go to the extreme left. What's worse is this prevailing notion that heterosexual white cisgender males are inherently aggressive and tyrannical. I want to use a source for that. I want to tell you where I heard that, but I hear it everywhere. It's everywhere. Even in my social problems class, it's what I'm taught. One thing I also heard, and I had to take a test where I had to answer, right, this question or answer in a certain way, that sex is inherently a power game. Sex is inherently based on one partner dominating over the other. Even in the textbook and with students, when you talk to students, they propose the intersectional theory that people should be divided according to their historically oppressed group identities. I forgot who it was. It might have been Campus Reform. I don't know who it was though. But some news organization went to a college campus and asked students if they thought there should be segregated dorms for colored students and white students. And almost all the students, obviously, I'm sure they probably talked to a good amount of students that disagreed and then put the ones that did say this. But even then, so many of them, they were able to find so many students that said, yeah, colored students were saying, yeah, I don't want to be housed with white people and I would like to be with fellow colored folk. And other people, white students would say, hey, if they want to be segregated, if it would make colored people of certain ethnicities more comfortable, then yeah, we should have it. They even said they should have segregated graduations. But then you go on the street, right? They went on the street and they talked to black folks and some Asian folks, and they said, and they asked them, if they thought there should be racially segregated, dorms or graduations. And the people were offended, obviously. Citizens were offended, as they should be. We're leaving, we left racism in the past. We're trying to get away from it, not bring it back. We're not, making amends for what happened in the past. We all need to move on. And that's a conservative thing. I'm sure many of you listening will be offended by that. By the fact that I don't think that there should be like retribution, right? Or that there should be recompensation for the treatment of certain individuals by other individuals in the past. I don't agree with the notion of original sin. I don't think you should be held responsible for the mistakes of your ancestors or your parents. I do think equal opportunity is important, though, and I do agree that there needs to be justice socially, and I don't think that's controversial at all. I don't think that's already a given in this nation. That's what this nation is founded upon. America is founded on the sovereignty of the individual, right? And intersectional theory is utterly unconstitutional. Bernie Sanders says that white people don't know what it's like to be poor. Elizabeth Warren's trying to be Native American. Beto O'Rourke, who's white, is trying to appeal to a Hispanic, Hispanic base by having the term Beto. By calling himself Beto. Like, as Hispanic, I find that offensive. My mom's family's of European descendants. She's Mexican, and my dad's Guatemalan, Native American as can be. Both of his grandmas spoke dialect. They didn't even speak Spanish. But I don't want to be looked at some kind of way specifically. I don't want to be looked at as better or worse just because of my ethnic background. I didn't work for it. It was given to me. I didn't ask for it. You don't get something if you didn't work for it. That's it for race, right? And academia and all that kind of stuff. But there's censorship going on too. Ideologies, right? Meghan Murphy was banned from Twitter because she said men aren't women, though. When she said that it's not right that transgender, male to female transgender females shouldn't compete in female sports. And it's true. If you have 8, 9, 12, 16, 20 years of male hormones and testosterone running through you, and then you have a sex change operation and you become female, or you're female, you still had testosterone. That's like taking steroids and then competing against people that didn't. And across the world, wherever it happens, the formerly male competitors demolish the females. And I don't agree with that. That's beating women. I don't agree with beating women. Alex Jones was banned, was deplatformed across the board, and that is inexcusably disgraceful. People have a right to say what they will. If you trust in truth, which we do, right? You have faith that the truth will prevail. So why don't we debate people that we disagree with and let the truth battle it out? Why don't we battle it out with truth, with words, and have faith that the truth will prevail, and be open to the fact that maybe we don't have all the information. And if the people don't want to, and if we have the truth, the information, right, the truth, and we're on the side of right, then we should trust that, the person we're arguing will see our side, at the very least see where we're coming from, and we can agree to disagree. Count Dankula was arrested, I believe, a few years back for teaching his girlfriend's dog to do a Heil Hitler salute. It's a joke. It's not the best one. It's not a great joke, but it's a joke. Comedians won't even perform on college campuses anymore because people my age, my peers, are so easily offended. right? Sargon of Akkad was banned, right? In interest, I mean, I don't know. There's so many ways in which I feel that political correctness and social justice is stifling the freedoms and doing a disservice to actual social action and actual progress and actually the actual movement forward into the next phase, right? The next paradigm shift that we're moving into. We need to keep our wits about us when we're changing the world, right? And it's important that we make change where we can first. It's hard to change the world and the cosmos. It's even hard to change the legislature in your state and your local community, right? The smaller scale that you go towards, the easier it is to make a change. You can make a change in your household. You can make a change in your own life. We can make changes in our own lives. I can affect my household and my neighborhood and my community more easily than I can affect the greater structure of our culture, of which those are just units. And I know I'm sorry I went on for so long, but yeah, I'm gonna end it here, and I hope I haven't alienated any of you. But yeah, I'll post as soon as I can with another video on something that's probably less divisive, probably less heated. And yeah, I hope you'll join me next time here on Just a Thought. And that's what this was, just a thought. So have a blessed day, everybody. Namaste, as they say, namaskar. I love you all. I hope things go great for you. Best of luck in your endeavors. And yeah, I'll see you next time.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording,